The views and opinions expressed by the guests of Sasquatch Experience do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Does a legend walk among us, lurking in the forests of our world?
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my sensor light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something. Looks like a man. I don't know what it was.
For over 15 years, we've talked with scientists, researchers, investigators, and witnesses, trying to gain insight and proof around the existence of this mysterious entity.
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Tia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Join us as we continue into the investigation of the Sasquatch Experience. And good evening, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome back to the Sasquatch Experience.
2022. Wow.
2022.
Already it's 2022. You know, I look back in our memories and it's like 2021, year of the Sasquatch with a big old question mark. Apparently not. So let's push it into 2022 and see if we can't come up with some definitive things this year.
Well, this year at the beginning, we're going farther north. And what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to be talking about Canada, the Great White North, the Northern Territories.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Alaska.
Way up there north. While we're walleye fishing, and we see the Bigfoot. Okay.
And we'll get real Canadians on the show, thankfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Canadians on the show, I'm still totally enthralled with Corey Lecapoy's encounter that he had in Upper Manitoba, because that thing ran right in front of his car while he was taking photographs of the lake while he was on his trip to go visit his sister. And I know he's still very disturbed by that entire encounter. So maybe we can revisit that again too. But you know, clearly the upper North Canada and Alaska Sasquatch, an entirely different entity and encounters that have been at least seen and reported up there. I don't know. I just, my heart goes out to the guy for what he had seen, and it ran right behind his car. And I believe he claimed that thing was 10 feet tall and had long hair like a rock star, along with a hair-covered body. So, anyway, I didn't want to interrupt what your thought was there, but
well, it's
that's
too late.
Something I'm sure we'll touch base on too.
Well, before Vance went on his filibuster, I was going to introduce us all. I'm Sean the Fork Chop Forker. Underneath me is James Baker, who, by the way, if you hadn't noticed, aside from drinking straight from the bottle of wine, you miscreant, has also got a more professional setup going here. Listeners, we've listened and got him set up just for you.
It's not an orb.
It's not an orb,
and
it is
over his shoulder. Right.
A glare shining off his head. That's Henry May up top in the corner. Henry, of course, been on the show with us since 2006. The co-creator of the program. Henry, how you doing, buddy? A little bit of a delay here. Apparently, for some reason, it takes forever for the signal to get to Mississippi and then back. And then, of course, we have Vance Nesbitt down in the bottom corner. You know, our good friend Vance, who is jumping ahead tonight. But yes, Vance, we are going to talk about Corey because we're going to get Corey back on the show this season. And I was trying to pull up the episode number that so folks could go back and listen to Corey's show because Corey gets really emotional about it. He really does, and it was a hell of an experience for him. And he tells it so well. It's worth going back to take a listen. The name of the episode is Canadian Bigfoot Encounters. And we're going to get Corey back in the program to not just talk about his Bigfoot sighting again, but the research he's doing and how he's faring through everything. I know it's been real difficult up there for him in Canada. He's a good friend of ours and can't wait to talk to Corey again here on the program. Aside from that, we're going to get Larry Beans Baxter back on because, guys, I didn't send out the show guide to you, but I had a format for the show here. I'm going to reorganize the topics on myself because I just think it's going to flow better this way. Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. I don't know if you guys have seen any episodes on Discovery Plus. Definitely different. It's going in a way I didn't expect it to go. I love the Alaska footage and all
good. That's okay. It's a
what
delay.
the fuck? Okay.
It's a delay. It's okay.
Oh my God!
Did we cross the space-time continuum?
Can we go back in time and save Betty White?
What was I talking about here? I have no idea.
That's okay.
What the? Well, Henry, we're glad you're with us now. Finally, somehow everything. I have no answers for that. I don't know what the hell just happened.
Oh, that's okay.
Henry, you're with us in real time. Let's give him a second to answer. Henry, you back with us?
Eventually.
Okay. Well,
I could drive to Mississippi and work him like a puppet by the time he can respond.
Well, I want to give him some time to respond, but I want to keep us going live. And I'm afraid that we're going to start talking and he's going to start answering us again in an hour. So I don't know. Folks, I'm sorry. This is live radio. I have no idea what the hell's going on, but the show must go on. And thanks for
half the beauty of what it is that we do.
I don't even know what we're doing right now, but Henry at least is in motion, so we'll accept that. So we were talking about Alaskan Killer Bigfoot taking off a different direction that I thought it was going to go. I believe they're on 5 or 6 episodes so far. The last couple episodes have featured Ron Moorhead, and I know we want to get Ron on the show to talk to Ron about the Sierra Sounds and so on and so forth, but I just don't know if the whole objective is for these guys to go back and kind of map out Portlock or Port Chatham. What we had Larry on the program talking about last year. And you want to talk about some very interesting stories and things that are happening. The things that had happened in that area, they're going to go back and try to map it because apparently the tribe needs more land and they want to get the port going again. Right. But of course, there's the complication that there's a said Bigfoot still in that area, and for whatever reason, Bigfoot doesn't like the local people and wants them to kind of stay away. So this episode's kind of very dramatic and very interesting, but I don't know. You can tell so much of it is directed for TV. It's kind of disappointing.
No, I totally agree. But, there is some old Monster Quest episodes that speak of the Sasquatch up in Alaska and along the shorelines there, and those are still interesting because just of the fact of it supports the whole Chatham thing altogether. So yeah, we're having a little bit of a delay, but that's okay.
No. I'll accept a little bit of a delay. This is time distortion. This isn't a delay.
Well, it's a paranormal thing, and maybe we should just send this whole episode over to Into the Fray Radio. I don't know.
We would have better communication if Henry was on Mars than Mississippi.
Oh, what's the
Still
difference
talking about
between
that 20 minutes ago.
Mississippi and Mars? I don't know.
Well,
They
hold on
both
now.
begin
Before
with
we
the letter
go,
M.
Henry, are you back with us in real time?
I'm not
He
sure.
stuttered.
I quit.
I'm not sure.
Okay, I don't know how to fix this. So
Just-
we'll truck on here.
Yeah, that's
This
okay.
is.
He looks like somebody from the St. Jude's picture.
Oh, stop
Uh,
it! Would you behave yourself, James Baker?
Look, this is the Sasquatch drinking game. For every time Henry does chime in, everybody take a drink. Okay.
Our listeners would be dead for.
It's alcohol poisoning.
So now everybody's drinking tonight, but me. Can't you tell? I'm the only one who's
No,
edgy.
no. Yeah,
Henry
that's okay.
looks like Jack Nicholson right there. Says, hi. And Vance has already drunk a bottle of bourbon, and Baker's drinking right on the show. He's just got a gallon of wine there he's sipping from. So anyhow, back to what we were talking about. Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. Take your time, folks. Watch it if you'd like. It's just very disappointing. And, you know, the fact is they had some really good research up there. You know, a person that really does the research that they could have networked with and utilized, and they didn't.
Right.
And that's really disappointing.
Right.
So all the work going on in the Kenai Peninsula that Larry Beans Baxter's doing, like I just feel like this show is kicking it right in the crotch. And I also feel like for some reason Alaska has become this, you know, focal point in media. Like I know Seth Breedlove plans on going to Alaska with Alexander Petikov. They're doing, you know, I think it's called On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Last Frontier or something, I think is what that's titled.
It is.
You have Stephen Major and Larry going back to Alaska, I believe, here again soon. And a lot of stuff going on. I'm losing my train of thought here.
No, that's okay.
Between Baker barking and Henry on Mars, we've got a lot.
Well, like you've got a point. Like when we were going to book a cruise to Alaska, one of the big things was like you could do a Bigfoot expedition as part of it. Like it's becoming part of their hook. You know, come to Alaska. We got Yeti, or we got a not Yeti.
Right.
Wait for me.
And it is such a big part of the culture up there on top of all of it.
Is it though?
Yeah,
I don't
really
know.
is.
I don't know if that's factual because maybe
I
a
think
more
it's
recent
starting
thing,
from,
Vance.
At least starting from Vancouver,
I think
it's
so.
very much part of the culture up there. And as you move east into Canada, you still find it there as part of the culture and as part of the however you want to categorize it. It's still there in trading posts. You still see a lot of iconic figures of the Sasquatch there throughout at least central Canada. And then there's those once you get into central Canada and eastern Canada. Once you get into British Columbia, it really becomes a big part of the culture there. So
I don't doubt that for
central
Canada. I'm talking about Alaska.
Well,
I don't
as
know
far
if
as
it's
Alaska
culture.
goes, like I said, once you're into Vancouver, it is big in that culture there. It really is big in the culture there. And then once you move up into Alaska, you know, I think it might just be more of a known entity, but maybe not so much as a populous type of talking point.
That's what I said.
Believe that it's,
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the same thing.
Same
I don't think
it's,
I don't think it's as pop culturally significant in those areas.
Imposed.
You know, I think we've here in the States and in Canada have found a way to really whore out Sasquatch and, you know, make a nickel off it, and that's okay.
No,
you know,
it's
become another icon,
we'll
right?
Find out for ourselves, yeah, right.
But the methodology is different. It's a lot different terrain up there, much rougher place to live. And, you know, I'm very happy that we have some real credible researchers up there, and we have other people going up to, you know, film documentary besides the stuff we're getting on the Discovery Channel, which just isn't good enough.
Right.
I would like it to be better. It's just not.
You know, Sean, and in the area in which I'm at right now, it's 11 degrees outside. Actually, it's probably a little bit colder. It's probably down to 9. And, the rabbits seem to do fine. The birds seem to do fine. I don't know about a huge bipedal creature in polar temperatures in that region and how well it would fare. But I've often thought about that is, in Alaska, yeah, it gets bastard colder. And I just often wonder how well would a bipedal creature fare in those type of climate. I don't know.
Well, bears
I
seem
would
to do
assume
okay, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, the Kodiaks seem to do okay, and you're talking, 500 to 600 pound Kodiak bear, and for a lot of the testimonials for what people have seen up there, they characterize this bipedal creature weighing 1,200 pounds. I guess if you're a 1,200 pound creature, yeah, you probably got a little bit of body fat on you to be able to deal through some seriously brutal polar winters. But again, I know I wouldn't want to be out there. Yeah, right.
But Will Capps' comment, it's probably wearing a fur coat, which is hilarious.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, right?
But you do have sightings of those. When you go up to Maine, a lot of the northern territories where it's colder, there are stories of these things wearing clothing. There have been a lot of reports of. I think I even read one not too long ago of it wearing like a flannel shirt or something.
Right?
That
yes.
it, and you think about it, if it's a scavenger, or, opportunist, it just probably picked it up off a dead hiker or something it found off the side of the road or whatnot.
But nonetheless, I mean, what's the intelligence level if you're putting the shirt on? You clearly had to observed, humans putting the shirt on, and if it's adapt enough in its intelligence level to put on a flannel, I don't know what a flannel shirt would do.
I don't think it buttoned it. I mean, I don't even know if it would even fit.
In British Columbia.
I've seen people in flannel that don't have a high intelligence.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
boy.
I don't know.
Central
this
PA.
is all the discussing point. This is true.
But like you talked about, these things up in that area reported to be much larger, heavier, more well-built creature. For the environment, it's got to sustain itself in. But imagine what it would have to eat to sustain itself, But, a lot of the things it would eat are a lot bigger up there. Moose. That's a pretty big animal in itself.
Moose and bear and deer. Sure. Of course.
Penguins.
Ooh. No, penguins don't live in the north. They only live in the south. So that's okay.
We lost Henry.
Sorry, Henry.
He'll be back.
Yeah.
We got to get him straightened out because he's dropped off the face of the earth.
We'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
But the whole subject of the North, everything north of North Dakota and Minnesota,
Montana.
There's so many stories up there of this whole bipedal Bigfoot thing. And we're talking not just many stories, we're talking hundreds of stories that come out of there. Yeah, there sure is a lot. So,
but not just from, white people. You got them from the native folk as well up in that area.
Right.
And, that's the interesting thing that, for some reason we often downplay that. And I think now, whether it's just a new type of researcher or people really just starting to give it more credence, the native legend and lore is being taken a little bit more seriously than it has in the past. And like folks like Kathy Strain that have been putting the information out there, collecting it and make it easier to find, really makes that, James Housekeeper in the background, makes that a lot easier for folks to, understand and get that knowledge beefed up a little bit, because these stories transcend just people seeing them along the road in their backyards. The native legends go on for hundreds of years.
So what's your take on the whole thing? Do you think that this is a different type of species that would live in Canada and that would live in Alaska as opposed to those that are seen in the Texarkana area?
Well, that's a good question for the group here, and I think we could rotate through that. Go ahead, James.
But the question is a brown bear and a black bear a different species, or just because they're a different color? You know, like you might have a Sasquatch that grew longer hair because that's what it needed, just like melanin in people's skin is a certain level because of the continent that required it. You know.
So, but you're talking about bears. You know, there's grizzly bears, the American, black bear. There's Kodiak bear. You know, those. We got something going on there. Polar bear. You know what I mean? There's different species of bear, James, but their builds are a lot different because of the environment that they have to adapt in.
Right, right.
You talk about an assumptive species like a Sasquatch, right? I think it just adapts to the area that it is surviving in. Something in Florida, if it weighed 800-900 pounds, one would stand out like a sore thumb. Would also have to eat a tremendous amount to keep itself going, but would also be very subjected to the temperament. The heat and humidity would make it very uncomfortable for something like that to sustain itself.
And then probably even a little more crabby,
But then you go, like you said, Texarkana area, right? It may be something a little bigger because the temperature, the climate change is a little different than it is, a lot of different than it is in Florida. And then as you get up into here, like Pennsylvania and the Northeast and the northern parts of the country, it has to take itself and be built for that environment. So are you talking about a different species? I don't think so. I just think you have an adaptive species to the area it's living in.
Right. Yeah, and I guess the mentality and the motivation for which it has and within its environment, because some say, the ones in the southern lower 48s are much more aggressive than those in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. They seem to be a little bit more mellow and keep to themselves. And
docile.
And maybe it's just because of population center. That I don't know.
I don't know either, but when you look at the areas these things cover and how they have to be built to sustain themselves in the environment, and you also deal with a lot of bullshit that comes in on these Bigfoot reports, right? My whole problem with the Dogman thing right now is, if you go back several years ago before this Dogman thing became popular, nobody was talking about it. Right. But you do have reports of Bigfoot with more of an elongated nose, right? Like starts get kind of bamboonish or mandrilish, right? When even we watch something stupid like Primal Rage, we all watch that watch along with Primal Rage. The creature in that movie that they portrayed it at had a protruding snout. Right? It wasn't flat-faced or human-faced, as opposed to when you go to like Exist, and when you look through like Pete Traver's artwork, or you look through, what Sibylla Irwin's do, when you look through what all the different artists' interpretations are. And again, this is where and I think I'm going to take us on a tangent, and I apologize. What gets me is these artists doing these forensic sketches there's so much of what they think and what they want it to be that translates the paper. And as they're doing these sketches, you're almost talking the person in that's giving you the information into what it looks like. It's almost like a reverse because it fits the narrative that you want. Your bias, you're putting your bias on the paper. And I'm not saying that it's done nefariously. I'm just saying that it's done.
Right. No. I totally agree. I will go back to a witness that had an encounter and I want to say it was Mississippi, and I'm not going to give the name out because it was a really very enthralling encounter that this individual had. But he stated that the creature that he saw was on the cover of the book Them and Us. And it's pretty creepy, and it's a pretty relevant artwork for Them and Us. Again, it kind of goes to the whole primate and human cross thing. he said the only thing he would change in that artist description is the eyes, because it was more cat eye in the book cover of Them and Us. But he said the eyes were a little bit broader and not so much like cat eyes. But he said, other than that, that's exactly what he had an encounter with. And I would have been terrified seeing something like that. But, you know, again, I have seen other artists' renditions that I would say, you know what, that's very plausible for what people describe that they've had encounters with. It seems very plausible. And the first thing I always look at is the broad of the mouth. A lot of people say the mouth was so big and the nose was a little bit not so much human, but a little bit flatter, but not quite as much. But it was the mouth. And when I see a lot of the artist renderings showing that mouth, I'm like, that's a very plausible piece of artwork. And I could see that something like that would exist.
Yeah, again, if you really look at what the data shows in the reports and you draw what's there, I think you'd oftentimes see something different than what the final artist comes up with. And I think we have this predilection at this point where so many people have popped on to the, well, it's a man, or it's a a primitive man.
Right.
And I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think the evidence supports that at all. I really don't. And I know some people feel that it's an offshoot of something, or it's a paranthropus, or it's still not a man.
But don't you think a lot of that is if there was DNA that was too similar to human, that may be the reason why none of this was. And I know I'm going down in a completely different rabbit hole right now, that may be the reason why this thing hasn't been exposed, because of the civil rights thing. And
so how close is our DNA to chimpanzees, Vance?
Yeah, no, I know. We're at what, 99.8%?
And they don't look like people.
No, not at all. There's behavior similarities, but yeah, no, I'm totally.
But now think about though, and I know we have to take our break here. Think about this though, Vance. Bigfoot behavior in comparison to chimpanzee behavior. And then you start asking yourself some questions.
Right. No. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, let's just go back to something as simplistic as wood knocking or rock clacking. That seems to be very chimpanzee type of behavior. Yeah, go ahead, Bake.
Couldn't the behavior be based on what works for them? In a way, like chimpanzees use tools because in their environment, a certain tool gets them more ants. Bigfoot may use tree knocking because that's what works to get him a hottie. There may be a reason that they don't. They used to say like the Native Americans were primitive, but the Native Americans weren't primitive. They just didn't care to make flintlock rifles. Once they realized the rifles exist, they're like, "Oh my God, we need this."
No, I totally agree with you, man. I
totally these agree. Things don't do any of this at all, and it's just attributes that we give it because we haven't seen it happen.
We just don't know that. Peck on the tree to get larvae out. Well, who's to say that a Bigfoot doesn't bang on a tree to make larvae move around a little bit, even if it's in the dead of winter, just because of the shock wave of banging on a tree? It might not be a communication thing. Again, these are all mysteries that are left, open-ended right now, but, it might just be a feeding thing and not so much communications either.
No, we don't know, right? So much that. But we are at the bottom of the hour. We're going to have to take our break, folks. We'll be back. No. Sean Forker, Vance Nesbitt, James Baker, Henry Mays back in the green room. We'll be back in just a few moments. Smoke them if you got them. We'll see you after the news.
Have you or someone you know experienced a Bigfoot encounter? You may be entitled to a large interview compensation. Recent studies show that individuals who've been exposed to a large hair-covered hominid received great relief by sharing their experience with notable topic researchers. Results show that experiencers get a better night's sleep, able to interact socially again, and even subside their fear of the great outdoors. So again, if you or someone you know suffered a Bigfoot encounter, contact the offices of Forker, May, Baker, and Nesbitt at Sasquatch Experience at gmail.com. Again, that's Sasquatch Experience at gmail.com. Keep it upbeat, Vance. Welcome to the Stranger Than Fiction News and Stories, Season 5, and a grandiose Happy New Year to everyone. Well, now look at here. There has been a Bigfoot sighting in Illinois. A very reliable sighting near Sasquatch Hotspot in Illinois. Did I mention it was in Illinois? Out of St. Louis, a Bigfoot has apparently been spotted near what is being called a hotspot, in quotes, for Sasquatch activity, again, in Illinois. Now, the group that you all know of, called the BFRO, reports a sighting on November 27th of last year in Cass County. The expert, quote-unquote, spoke to the witness and calls it a very reliable sighting. So the report goes on to say that it happened near a town of Chandlersville on Route 78 near the Sangamon River. The witness reported that he saw a large animal jump into the road about 40 yards ahead of his vehicle. He says when the animal hit the road, he could see very large legs spread wide, whoa, with large swinging hair-covered arms. This paints a picture that was kind of creepy. He said it leapt across the road in 2 jumps. The witness says he only saw it for a few seconds, but it was very large, and even though it was hunched over, it was nearly wider than his car. He said it blocked out the lights of the cars ahead of him. The witness says he later found out from his co-workers and other hunters, fishermen, and even barge operators that have reported multiple sightings in that area, and that sounds very feasible. A member of the organization responded to the sighting and said his report seems very reliable. The member also said while his first reported sighting in Cass County, there are 13 reports in neighboring counties. There's a YouTube documentary called A Sasquatch Theory, recently released a video about the possible sighting near the Mark Twain Forest in Missouri. This has quite some distance from central Illinois, but some wondered if the two incidences could be related. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the state of Illinois, north central, central, and southern Illinois are very rural areas. No, the entire state is not one continuous urban area. As a matter of fact, most of the state is forest covered with state parks and local parks and, of course, agriculture. Now, one of the most famous cases came out of the Peoria, Illinois area of the Coal Hollow Monster, where this creature had been seen several times over a few-month period as a white hair-covered bipedal creature. Now, strangely enough, less than 100 miles due west of Peoria into the state of Missouri was another creature, bipedal, white, hair-covered. And I often wondered, was this the same creature? I don't know. We leave it up to speculation, but I find it interesting. Okay, so that wraps it up for this edition of the Stranger Than Fiction News and Stories. Thanks again for joining us for Season 5. It's going to be a fun season. And of course, once again, Happy New Year to all our listeners.
Well, that was interesting. I thought we were going letters from Penthouse there for a second.
With the legs spread. Yeah. I know.
How about that?
Wow. It's just quite an interesting description. Very interesting.
I am not going to say what just came to mind. We're going to move past that because I don't want to get into that. Hey, Henry's back. Good to see you, Henry.
Hey,
yeah, I'm
Henry.
on my phone. I'm on my phone, so
that's okay. We'll gladly we're here to have you in any way, shape, or form. Go ahead, Vance. I'm sorry.
I wanted to touch on a base that Homer Bigfoot Research Group asked, do Sasquatch eat rabbit? Could they actually catch one, or would they just stick to berries, etc.? I don't know. I mean, as far as the research continues to go, it seems like an omnivore and maybe consume both. I would guess that it would probably do rabbits and deer and other wildlife, squirrel, raccoons, etc., that might be in the area. But again, I have to stick to what my principal motive is here, that I constantly will throw quotation marks up in the air when somebody says they're a Bigfoot expert. There is no such thing. In my opinion, there is no Bigfoot expert. So to say, do they catch rabbits? It's very possible, but I don't know that we have that kind of information yet.
What say you, Henry?
Well, I agree. There are no Bigfoot experts. I completely concur with that.
What do you think about it catching rabbits? You think it's a rabbit eater?
As far as catching rabbits, if it can't catch anything else, maybe it can catch rabbits, unless the rabbits are too fast for it.
I don't know. I've never had rabbit, so I don't know what I'm missing out on. Maybe I should try. I don't know if I could. I don't know. So that was a good question.
Homer
though.
replied back that he's not an expert, just curious if you guys had any info.
What do you think, Homer?
Again,
what does Homer think?
Yeah, Homer. What do you think? In my opinion, from a lot of the witness testimonies over the years, and when I'm saying years, we're talking a compilation of quite a few years. Bigfoot can move rather quickly. And it would seem to me that it would be able to move faster than what a rabbit can. I've seen rabbits run at full speed. And, if you have something that's bipedal and much larger, it might be able to keep pace and, scoop the thing up and, take it home to the family and have a little bit of rabbit dinner. But I would only assume as much.
As we were going to go into the topics here a little bit, we talked about the Alaska Killer Bigfoot, the attention that Alaska's getting with the Bigfoot media. I guess we could call it Bigfoot media. The different excursions and events that are happening. It's just escaping me as to why right now, and I think part of it is that there's that fantasy element that it is the last frontier, right? We haven't spent a lot of time, talking about it as a whole. And it's a very desolate area, right? And there are a lot of strange, I want to say Bigfoot sightings up there, but shows like Missing in Alaska, the Alaskan Triangle, those kind of TV shows that have really kind of, I don't want to say exploited, but have really put attention on, these Bigfoot sightings in this area. They're very interesting. You don't hear a lot about them. You get a lot about Bigfoot in the States, but the 48 states, but you don't hear a lot about it. So I'm anxious to see what some of our other, compatriots are going to do out there with this information, because Alaskan Killer Bigfoot made for TV, and it's still not impressing me. I'm giving it a thumbs down so far. And I don't think you three have seen it yet, have you?
No, I have not.
No? What's stopping you?
Primarily what I have signed up for in subscriptions, but that's that's a whole different story. But I want to touch back to the base in which you had just brought up of the remote areas and the wilderness that's in the Great North. For those that are listening that have not traveled through the lower 48s, it is astounding of the amount of land which is still yet to be discovered and traveled through by humans. I mean, I've gone off hiking trails in the Great Northwest, and I've stepped off the trail and wandered back 100 yards and said to myself, this tree, I'm probably the first human that's ever looked at this tree. I'm probably the first human that's ever looked at this little ant climbing up on that tree. So there's still a lot yet to be explored within those areas, let alone in Alaska, because yes,
Yeah.
Alaska is the last frontier, but
No, I think you make a good point there. When you look at the map of the continental United States, you see all that land, and you think, man, we're in all of that, and for the most part, yes, it's true. But there's so much openness in the plains and in the north, in the northern plains and in the mountain areas, Montana, Wyoming, even Utah, Idaho, areas out in that, big mountainous, very wilderness area that if you look on a map, yeah, that's all United States, but look at population centers. And when you start looking at like density of population, it starts to get alarming how much of that is actually open space
and
that we don't
undiscovered.
spend a lot of time in. Yeah.
But don't you feel the
And-
same way about Pennsylvania?
Well, so funny. When you think of Pennsylvania, you think Philadelphia, you think Pittsburgh. You don't think about everything else in between. And there's a lot of parts of Pennsylvania that are pretty remote. And I think when you live in Pennsylvania and you appreciate that, it loses some of the fantasy elements of it.
Right.
But, even where James and I were out today, we're 10 minutes away from Williamsport, which isn't a big town, 30,000 people if we're lucky. I think that's what the census said, net loss of people over the last census. But, you're still 10 minutes out of there and it's desolate.
Right.
If he was out working with his chainsaw and hurt himself, there's a chance somebody wouldn't find him for a week or so out there.
Right.
Or ever, unless I went out to look for him, So little things like that you take for granted, that even though we live in these populated areas, you don't have to go very far outside of them to realize that there's nothing in terms of, people activity.
Right.
How much is happening with animals and how much is going unseen because we're not out there on a continual basis. And that's a sobering thought when you think about it. What goes on in those areas that we don't see? We have a couple game cams out on the property, and today I looked at 1,200 pictures of wildlife. When he and I are out there, we don't see a damn thing. But when we're not there, there's 1,200 pictures of wildlife, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's the same thing that I brought up in this whole news segment is, and I'm not going to sit here and glorify or caption the state of Illinois, but a lot of people that do listen to the show assume that Illinois is just
Chicago.
It's Illinois, it's an urban area. But in all actuality, I can drive within 30 minutes of here and be in complete remote areas in forest lands that probably not too many people have even traveled through. And it's
I think if you look at it,
Southern Illinois.
But if you look at that,
Vance,
Vance,
of reports in Southern Illinois, right?
Most of Illinois population's like right on the banks of the Great Lake.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like shipping
that's what I'm
and
talking about, right? Because once you go to Western Illinois, due west of Chicago, all the way to the Iowa border, you're in the Galena area. It's very, I won't say mountainous, but it's very hilly, very forest lands, a lot of state parks out there, and a remote area in which a lot of people have not gone in to discover what's in these areas yet. And look at how we're talking, 247 years, and people still haven't gone into these areas yet to develop it. So it does leave that optimism open that, there could be something out there. There's still BFR repos. BFR
repos.
Reports. Yeah,
BFR repos.
BFR reports
Bigfoot repo.
that come from that center of Illinois, north central Illinois, and southern Illinois, which takes you right into Kentucky and takes you right into Tennessee. And where are a lot of these reports coming out of?
Absolutely.
Is the beginning of the Ozarks. So, I think it's the same thing with Pennsylvania. You don't have to travel very far.
No, and again, like I get hesitant to start saying, there's an influx in sightings and so on and so forth, because I think the fact of the matter is the sightings happen. They just get reported at times more than others. I don't think there's one area that's potentially hotter than the other. Because I think that would be inclusive of the thought of migration, which I don't think we've been successfully able to prove that happens, because you have reports that happen all year round. in areas, right? So
Right,
I
right.
don't know if any one area is hotter than the other. I think it's just that one area gets attention, people pay attention.
Right.
And that's when sightings happen. So, like Southwest Pennsylvania is the hottest part of the state if you look at sightings, concentration of sightings. But newsflash, people, that's where 98% of researchers in Pennsylvania are.
Right.
So yeah, that's where you're going to get your sightings. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure it out. It's like Eastern
Right.
Ohio. Well, of course you get a lot of sighting reports in Eastern Ohio. Why? Because that's where all the friggin' the investigators are. And as we started exploring, James and I started exploring up here in the north and central and the northern part of the state. Guess what? We got our fat asses out to Clearfield, and we started getting more reports in Clearfield, and we start getting them out in Tioga County. And just because you start building rapport with people and they start getting comfortable to tell you these sightings. So, and I think the play to be made for people is, for our friends in research, is start getting into these rural towns and getting to know some of the people a little bit and start, finding a way to make a connection and start getting some of that info coming in. Because I think what we're going to find is that maybe, as we thought over the years, it's not that these sighting reports are a rarity. It's just that finding someone to talk about it to is more rare than the actual activity in itself.
Right. So since we're starting into the season 5 in the north,
farther north, not further north,
including
farther
Alaska, so you have a lot of natives that have lived there their entire life, and there's lore about a bipedal creature in that area, but maybe it's just not as prominent to talk about such a subject. It's just a known thing.
But that's what's interesting, because you do have the native lore up there, but the one thing that you have a lot of, and you have a lot of converts to Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox Christianity up there. And Eastern Orthodox Christianity is a very traditional, very, I don't want to say methodical, but it's very
Old school.
intense. It's very intense, right? There's a lot of mysticism to it, but what it allows for is that this creature, being one of God's creatures, doesn't necessarily have to be anything spiritual at all, just as something that can coexist with the native thought. So I think what's interesting about there is you have native tradition and combined with this Eastern Orthodoxy, which is, kind of creates this unique little bubble that these folks live in. And that's really interesting to me. And they hinted on it a little bit in the Alaskan Killer Bigfoot in that first episode. It just, culturally, it's interesting to me, and I want to spend a little bit more time on it. I want to talk to people that live there and investigate there, and I want to know how all this comes together, how the religious components line up with the native tradition, and how it melds, and how this relates to the reality of Sasquatch. Why is there a superstitious, feeling to it? Like, how does it all come together? That's what I want to learn this season.
Okay, and with you saying that, it seems to me that if it's part of your everyday culture, you may just assume, living in that area, that the entire world assumes the same thing. And so therefore you may not talk about it as much, because you're assuming the rest of the world is on the same page that you are.
So,
but then when you start bringing up these stories of, hey, what do you know about this? It's like, well, first off, this is part of our everyday. Yeah. So why are you asking that question?
Or they don't care.
Or
they don't want you to know, because if you know, then you're going to be up their butt about it. Therefore, you're going to ruin the experience.
I think there's something to be said for what you were, just talking about, Vance's, because it's so commonplace and everyday to them. It's not as special, or it's not as mystical as it is for us, because for a lot of people in our belief, seeing is believing, and we're not as exposed to those things as they may be in this area. And like I said, how do they religiously and superstitiously and traditionally, how do all these things meld together? It's just interesting because I don't think it does that very well here.
Mm-hmm. No, I have to agree with that. And these are just things that, I have pondered on in my own private time, because there are things in the area in which I live in that I would only assume the rest of the country is in part of, but they're not. And when I find out that they're not, I'm kind of taken back by the whole thing. And it's like, well, I just kind of assumed the rest of the country was on board with this also, but apparently not. So then I wonder if the natives of, in Alaska and those that are tentatively, residents of Alaska and that have this on a regular basis, they may just kind of push it off as, well, yeah, everybody else knows about this. Well, we really don't.
I think we have to get a lot more skeptical about what we're going, what we take in as fact, what we take in as, actual events that are occurring, because we are in this strange age now where information flies at you at the speed of light. And we're putting so much of this content out there as content creators and informing the individuals, and not just us, other shows where we're talking about, behavior and sighting reports and all these thoughts and opinions on Bigfoot. We put so much information out there, we make it a lot easier to perpetuate hoaxing. And what my ask is that we start getting a lot more skeptical about the things that we accept, and we don't take it at face value, and we start getting a little harder on things that we consider to be evidence. And I don't mean that as by saying we need to be meaner to witnesses. I think we have to be more cognizant that the information that's coming at us isn't true information. And then once we start working with real, true information, where does that take us? And how do we weed it through the crap? And it's going to be an interesting season for us, that's all. And I know that thought was very sudden. It just spurred out of something in my mind.
Right.
But, Homer, Bigfoot Research Group, new to us. Thank you for joining us and liking our page there. I'd like to find out what the Orthodox view is on Bigfoot and how it fits in with the native culture up here. Since I'm Orthodox, it is an interesting question to ponder. Well, to my Eastern Orthodox brethren, Merry Christmas. Christmas just happened in the in the old calendar. I myself am Eastern Orthodox, so I'm familiar. I actually asked a priest once when we were here, what was the thoughts on Bigfoot? And that was kind of what I got. Well, if it's one of God's creatures, why is there anything wrong with exploring it and trying to, prove its existence while being respectful to the fact that it is a created creature and has the respect to live on the planet like anything else. But how does it meld? And that's a big question. And I know I've said it several times, but when you start pursuing this field, not just from an anthropological standpoint where you want to prove that this is a physical creature and exists, you also start thinking about it in other ways, sociologically, psychologically. How do these things fit into culture? How do they fit in the human psyche? NASA, I'm sure you guys all saw the reports a couple weeks ago, hired, 34 theologians. That's a big step, because now we have to start questioning the things we see in the sky and coming to Earth. How do we rectify that and bring it into what our beliefs are as people? It's really interesting to me, because it's not that much different. There are many strange things that live on this planet we cohabitate with that we discover every day.
Right.
And though sometimes we treat it as a tongue-in-cheek humorous thing, there's some real honest-to-God mysteries here.
Well, sure there is.
And when we uncover some of these mysteries, we have to realize that at some point may kind of shake up a belief system or things that we thought to be truths that aren't truths anymore. And it has to be handled in a very respectful and a very thoughtful way, because it impacts so many different things. Being human's not just a biology. Right, being human is a whole set of characteristics, beliefs, and an essence that make us what we are. I think we have to be prepared for that in some way, shape, or form when we start uncovering other species.
Right.
Go back in time and think about what it was like when we first discovered the mountain gorilla. You think that didn't jam some people up?
Yeah. Oh, I've often said that about the parrot. Once it started to mimic what people were actually saying, how did that freak them out? When it's mimicking, and there's other birds too that mimic, what human speech is, I'm sure that seriously freaked them out the first time that they had that experience. But, like you were saying with, Orthodox, I've had a conversation with somebody that's very strict Catholic, but left it open-minded enough to say, well, if it's one of God's creatures, it's there for us to figure it out.
That's
and
right.
if God doesn't want us to figure it out, then we won't figure it out. But he's very open-minded to the entire prospect that this creature could very well exist, and it was put here for a reason.
And I don't want folks to think this is going to become the Bigfoot Bible Hour. That's not what we're talking about.
Not at all.
I used Eastern Orthodoxy because it's prevalent in the area that we're talking about, right? Like, it's a big part of the culture up there, and it's actually a pretty large world religion, just not that popular, and it's at pockets across the United States. It's an old religion, right? And we have to be respectful of those things because, guys, the only way we're going to get to these truths is if we show a little respect, but a lot of skepticism. And those two things can reconcile as long as that when we're doing it, we keep the heart of, what we do. We strive to, stay to some decorum, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as we start exploring this. Because this is some crazy shit.
Right.
It really is. And I'm sure we're going to get into some crazy things, but I'm excited about it. We're going to go to back with Corey. I want to get Doug Hychick on the show. I want to get Abe Del Rio on the show. I want to go to Snell Grove Lake. I know that's not going to happen, but if we can even just
reply to Homer Bigfoot Research Group, we're going to have Larry Baxter back on the show again.
You're right. We will.
Yeah.
We're gonna really get into this. I know season 4 was about the missing, and as I reflect on season 4, it was good, it was bad, it got sticky, right? Because I think as we went more and more into the missing, we got a little depressed about it, because it's not a happy subject, right?
No.
So let's get
we
us
lost
back.
Henry for most of the episode.
We did. Henry missing 411, the May files.
All right.
9:57, folks. We haven't even got a social media plug-in. Find us Sasquatch Experience on Facebook or Instagram, Squatch EXP on Twitter. You can also subscribe to our Patreon for as little as, ladies and gentlemen, $2 a month. And what that gets you is ad-free shows. We got a caricature that we got to take and get printed and sent out for our experiencers. Guys, we couldn't do this show without you.
Without your money.
And we thank you all. Well, we could, but they just get the ad episodes. But every little bit helps. Because look, we get Baker acting a little bit more professional. I do listen to you.
Look at him. All fancy
It just
pants over there.
takes time.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. And if we could get them to AA next week, we'll be even
Now
better.
we got Henry's
Captain
nostrils.
Dandy of the USS Fancy Boy over there. Look at him.
I was going to make one of those charcuterie boards.
Now he's just getting fancy. But next week, stay tuned to the Facebook. We'll have updates of what we're going to go next week. Not that we haven't gotten that far yet. We just got to figure out where we're going. Next week we'll be back. We did throw a great episode up with Stan Courtney from the archives. Folks, I'm sorry it takes so long to get the archive shows going, but it's a lot of editing to get them up to today's standards. And I want to give you guys a good show each and every time you tune in and listen. So on behalf of myself and the guys, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. I got to get my screen going here. Any final words there, James, Vance, Henry?
I just want to hear.
I'm looking forward to 2022.
Yes. We were remiss to say, I don't know if we touched on it. I don't remember if we did, but Bob Saget, who passed away, was, an important part of the Bigfoot world. He did that great episode of Strange Days with Bob Saget, spent some time with our friends Tom Yamarone, Cliff Barrickman,
Right.
Bart Catino. Happy birthday, Bart, by the way. so it's kind of sad to see somebody connected to
it's very
the
sad.
entertainment world with our world, and we, enjoyed the bastard, and we hope to see him again on the other side, wherever that is, whatever you believe. We hope we meet up with Bob again someday. So thanks for the laughs, and next week, folks, we'll be back. Henry, give us those final words.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
Keep on.
You've been listening to Sasquatch Experience. Please rate and review wherever this podcast is consumed. To share your experience, visit us on Facebook or email us, squatchexperience@gmail.com. Keep on squatching.